Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Recha Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Zechariah, the 12th chapter. Okay, continuing from where we left off in the 11th chapter. And, Zechariah continues to pretty much prophesy, right? Some of these chapters, really most of them, are written in metaphorical sense. Sometimes they're analogies, sometimes they're dark sayings. Nevertheless, in this chapter, it mainly deals with the Lord defending Jerusalem, right? Protecting Jerusalem, raising up Israel, and then ultimately making sure that we're good. Okay, so let's get into it. This is the book of Zechariah chapter 12 verse 1. It says here, the burden of the word of the Lord Yahweh for Israel, saith the Lord Yahweh, which stretcheth forth the heavens, and layeth the foundation of the earth, and formeth the spirit of man within him. Right, and when you deal with the burden, you'll notice that, in the writings of some of these other prophets, they also mention the burden of the word of the Lord. And the burden is something that's likened unto something that's laid upon you, right? Something that's upon you, that weighs upon you. Okay, and in this case, the word of the Lord that Zechariah is speaking here is something that was going to take hold or be upon Israel, hence the burden. Okay, and at the same time, having to prophesy to a hard-headed nation like that, and do some of these things, could feel burdensome at times, but that is the job of a prophet anyway. Who stretcheth forth the heavens and layeth the foundation of the earth, right? Dealing with creation, which, when you really deal with the heavens and you even go right into the third heavens, the space, or not even the third, but just the atmosphere and space and all of that, you see how vast it is, right? And with all the different planets and all the different galaxies and solar systems and all those things, really the Most High had that all blueprinted, right? And then Yahweh Shai and the angels created it. But it's likened onto the Lord, simply just stretching, okay, those heavens like a curtain. I believe that's in the book of Psalms 104, if I'm not mistaken, or 103. Stretching the heavens like a curtain, okay, and laying the foundations of the earth. When you lay the foundations of something, that's like the base level, right, where everything else is built upon it. So you can imagine the things that make the earth what it is, right? The base elements and all that come together, and so on and so forth. And then of course the spirit of man, so the creation of our spirits and all of that. Now, that's about as much detail as I can give you, because I don't know how a spirit is created or formed anyway. So verse 2, behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in the siege, both against Judah and against Jerusalem. And now what the Lord is doing here for the next couple of verses is, overall, the message here is that the Lord is going to defend Jerusalem. He's gonna make it to where anybody that tries to come against us is going to be unsuccessful. And he says that in analogical, through analogies here, where he's likening Jerusalem here onto a cup of trembling. And when you go into that word trembling, it deals with being like intoxicated or reeling or staggering, like one that is drunk. Okay, so the Lord says here, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in the siege, both against Judah and against Jerusalem. And what this really means is just for anybody that tries to come against us, because when you deal with a siege, you have an enemy that surrounds whoever their target is. Typically, they would have to do that because their target would have a fortress or would be a defensed city. So, they would surround them. They might dig a trench, whatever the case is. Maybe those being besieged, you know, they have the people on the towers that are shooting things, projectiles at the enemy, all that good stuff. The point here being, you cannot properly implement a siege if you're staggering or reeling or intoxicated. Okay, so that siege would come to naught. Verse 3, and in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it. See? So in other words, even though pretty much all nations could come against you, but they will not succeed. Okay, and all those that come against us, as it says here, will be cut in pieces. They would be destroyed, and their efforts would be in vain in that day. And what day is that? That's the day where the Lord raises us up, okay, and gives us that power. And that is why their efforts are going to be in vain, because the Lord is going to bless us with power, as when we read on down, it tells us. But at the same time, the Lord is going to be defending us. As a matter of fact, the reason why the nation of Israel went into captivity in the first place, or suffered loss, or was brought under the power of the enemy, was because of the Lord, because the Lord fought against us, because the Lord used these enemies to come against us. But in this case, the Lord is doing the reverse. Hence, we're going to be likened unto that burdensome stone. And when you read in the book of Psalms, the 83rd chapter, it lists for you a great deal of adversaries that have come against Israel. Verse 4, in that day, saith the Lord Yahweh, I will smite every horse with astonishment. And that word astonishment goes into confusion, right? And his rider with madness. And I will open mine eyes upon the house of Judah, and I will smite every horse of the people with blindness. So you can imagine, right? If you have like war in the ancient world, a nation would come with its armies. You would have horsemen, which are men on horses, either with arrow, bow and arrow, or with sword, or with spears, whatever. You would have footmen, right? You would have some nations that had the means, elephants and chariots and all of those things. But imagine a nation coming against another nation, and their horses are smitten with confusion, okay, where you're trying to direct them in one way and they're going another way, right? The rider is smitten with madness, not having a sense of direction. You cannot properly go to war or come against somebody in that state, in that condition, right? So that's, once again, the Lord basically saying that no, we're going to be invincible. Nobody's going to be able to do damage or harm to Jerusalem. But he's using these analogies here of likening Jerusalem to this cup that makes people intoxicated or trembling, so they can't really attack you, right? Or likening Jerusalem to a burdensome stone that anybody that tries to lift or move gets cut in pieces, right? Or likening, anybody that comes against Jerusalem, in a warlike sense, to like having their horses smitten with madness or confusion, their riders smitten with madness. So you pretty much get the point. And I will open mine eyes upon the house of Judah, which really what the Lord is saying here is he's gonna watch over, okay, the house of Judah, which obviously that spreads also to the rest of the nation, but it starts with Judah, as we're gonna read on down. And I will smite every horse of the people with blindness, right? Reiterating the point that was just made above. And the governors of Judah shall say in their heart, the inhabitants of Jerusalem shall be my strength in the Lord of hosts their God. And why are they going to say this? Because by seeing how, in other words, the Lord is going to make Jerusalem invincible against anybody, because he is going to be with us and he is going to fight with us. And so, as it says here, the governors, or even in some translations, they have it as the leaders of Judah shall say within their heart, meaning they're going to reason within themselves to say, damn, so long as we have, we're together, right? The inhabitants of Jerusalem, and we have the Lord Yahweh, we're pretty much invincible. And the Lord is saying all of this, right, as we keep on reading, in that day. And that's not at the time that Zechariah is prophesying this. And it wasn't at the time of like Yahushua being on the scene, but it's really prophetic. It's a future prophecy, which is going to happen when the Lord comes back, because that's when he's going to change us and give us that power. And from that point on, nobody will be able to come against us. Verse 6, in that day, I will make the governors of Judah like an hearth of fire among the wood, and like a torch of fire in a sheaf. Now, a hearth is like a pot, right? Like a pot or a cauldron of fire. So you can imagine, obviously, if you want to have fire in a pot, you don't just throw fire in there. You have to have something that keeps the fire burning. So like coals or charcoal or whatever, right? As it says, among the wood, and like a torch of fire in a sheaf. Now, if you don't know what a sheaf is, let me just put it here. You can get an image, sheaf, and we'll just do like of wheat. So this, they say an image is worth what, 1,000 words or so. So this is like a sheaf. When you have harvest and you cut the grains, right, like these one by one, what they would do is that's what the reapers would do. They would use that sickle to cut it, and then they would bind it together, and together that bunch is referred to as a sheaf. Okay, so you have here like a sheaf of wheat, which is this bundle right here, and as you can see, it looks pretty dry, right? So if you were to light a fire amongst that, it would pretty much burn everything. And that's what the Lord is likening, as it says here in Zechariah 12:6. He's going to liken the governors of Judah onto that, like a torch in a sheaf, meaning we're going to devour. And you can imagine the enemies being the sheaf and the torch being, Israel or Judah in this sense. And they shall devour all the people round about, on the right hand and on the left. Devour doesn't mean that we're going to go around eating them like cannibals, obviously. Devour meaning that we're gonna have power over them, right? We're gonna take them over. We're gonna destroy them. But when I say destroy, I mean it in the sense of subjecting them under us. And of course, those that try to fight back will be put down. It says on the left hand and on the right hand and on the left, meaning everywhere. And Jerusalem shall be inhabited again in her own place, even in Jerusalem. Right. So at this time, the Lord is going to deliver the nation of Israel, right, starting with the elect, and bring us back to the land. And the land will be inhabited again with the actual Israelites. Verse 7, the Lord Yahweh also shall save the tents of Judah first, that the glory of the house of David and the glory of the inhabitants of Jerusalem do not magnify themselves against Judah. Right. So, and how did that manifest? How did the Lord save, right, the tents of Judah first? By bringing the way or the knowledge of salvation first to Judah, okay, or the tents of Judah being Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, starting over 2,000 years ago, right, when Yahushua came on the scene, but then also again in this time, when the Lord revived that spirit within us to open up our minds again to the path or the way of righteousness, which comes in the correct understanding of the Bible. And that started with the elders of our elders, right? The apostles of Great Millstone and their elders, which were, predominantly, if not all, from the tents of Judah, right? Judahites, Benjamites, Levites, okay, and then on down. And you notice it mentioned Judah first. So it doesn't mean that only Judites are going to be saved, all right, or only the kingdom of Judah, but it started there. And then eventually, you had more and more tribes the Lord put the spirit upon them to start to wake up and join and labor and so on. Okay, but remember that Judah is the head tribe. Okay, and so as we keep on reading, it says here, the Lord says he's going to do that the glory of the house of David. And when you go into that, it goes into like that Davidic line, and the glory of the inhabitants of Jerusalem don't magnify themselves against Judah. Yeah, because even though, David was a Judite, right? His lineage would be Judites. It's the head tribe is the tribe of Judah, not just the line of David. Okay, and so the Lord is saying here, so that the tribe of Judah is not overshadowed by the glory of the inhabitants of Jerusalem or the line of David, they would be saved first. Verse 8, in that day shall the Lord Yahweh defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem. See, so that line I just read pretty much sums up everything we've read up until now. The whole point here that Zechariah is making is we are going to be in a good state because the Lord is going to defend us. He just says it in so many words. Okay, and remember, he's prophesying, right? And this is something that we do today. When we go out there and speak, there may be a point that you're making overall. Like, as a matter of fact, when you deal with the doctrine is really like a set of points, right, that we're making, and we're using precepts and examples and speaking in the spirit, explaining certain things to drive home that point. And so sometimes you're making a point on being delivered or judgment coming upon people, and you can say you can give so many different scenarios, right? It's going to be like, imagine if this happened here in New York turned into this, or, you know, like in the movie I Am Legend, or this, how they did that, and the third. If they wrote, if a book was written based on how we prophesied, it would sound like this, where there's a main point of the chapter, but we're using examples and references to drive that point home. Hence, the verses above talk about, I will make the house of Judah like, or I'll make the inhabitants of Judah like this, or like that, or like this. But the main point here is the Lord is going to defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And he that is feeble among them at that day shall be as David. And when you read about the history of King David, he was a mighty man, not to be messed with. Okay, even from his young age up, slaying lions and bears up until Goliath, and just going up from there. And so the he that is feeble, meaning the weakest, okay, shall be like King David. And you know the saying, you're only as strong as your weakest link. So if you imagine a team of, like, I don't know how to put this, like, I don't know, maybe if you saw the Incredible Hulk in person, and he told you, hey, where I'm from, I'm the weakest guy over there. That sort of gives you an idea how strong where he's from the people are, right? Just based on him. If he's the weakest, then damn, I can only imagine what the rest are like. Right, so the Lord is saying here, you know, making this comparison, that the weakest will be like David, and we know David was not a weak person. And the house of David shall be as God. And here, the house of David is not just the line of David, it's talking about the elect, okay, because they're also likened onto the house of David. Shall be as God. When you go into the word God here in the Hebrew is Alhaim, which is powers or judges, or, you know, divine ones. So it doesn't mean they're going to be, you know, the most high. Okay, but the house of David is going to be like God's, which we know according to, you know, Psalms 82 and other precepts. When the Lord changes us, right, starting with the elect, we're going to become as gods, or not even as gods, we will become gods as the angel of the Lord before them, right? Because the angels are also powers. Okay, and when you actually look into the word, let's look into the word God. You see Alahayam, and if we open that here, you can see even in the example they list what? Angels, right? Divine ones, rulers, judges, gods. And that's what the elect are gonna, really the whole nation in due time is gonna become. But it's gonna start with the elect, i.e. the house of David. Verse 12, and it shall come to pass in that day that I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. Because though the Lord brought them against us, they still harmed us, they still touched us, and we're the apple of the Lord's eye, right? Them touching us is like touching the apple of the Lord's eye. So the Lord is going to seek to destroy anybody that tries to come against us, because he promised us that we wouldn't be in fear anymore. right? And our habitation would be peace. And he would be like that defense. Verse 10, and I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and of supplications. And they shall look upon me whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him as one that mourneth for his only son. And he shall be, Slakia, and shall be in bitterness for him as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn. Now, the spirit that the Lord is going to put, and this is really going to take place, post deliverance, right? The him, when it says they shall look upon me, whom they have pierced, that's talking about Yahushai. All right, the piercing is obviously Yahushai being crucified at the behest of Israel, or those wicked Israelites that pushed for it. But obviously it was prophecy anyway. And I'll get a precept for that, because in actuality, when you cross-reference Zechariah 12 and 10, one of the precepts that it gives you is John the 19th chapter, which we'll read in a second. But here, what the Lord is going to do basically is put back on that appearance. Right now, you can think of when you read in the New Testament how the Lord at the Transfiguration, where he basically transfigured himself to where now you could see him, and you could see what looked like who was it, Elijah and Samuel, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see, the Transfiguration. See if it tells us. Okay, here's a verse. I just want to see who were the two. Yeah, Salakia, Moses. You had Moses and Elijah, right? So he made it look like Moses was there and Elijah was there, and they were both basically like talking to him, right? Or they were just there. So similarly, the Lord is going to be able to display that body that he was in when he was crucified, and upon seeing that, everybody is going to mourn. Okay, as like it says here, and they shall mourn for him, Yahushai, the Messiah, as one that mourneth for his only son. So you're gonna mourn like as if you had only one son, and then he was murdered or he was put to death, and shall be in bitterness for him as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn. Okay, because that is Yahushai, the only begotten, or the first begotten, but the only begotten of the Father, and the firstborn of many brethren, right? Now, let's go real quick to the book of John, chapter 19. And I'm going to start at verse 34, because the Apostle John also made reference to this precept, or let's say this writing. So this is John 19 and 34. But one of the soldiers with a spear pierced his side, and forthwith came there out blood and water. And this is Yahushai who was pierced here. And he that saw it bare record, and his record is true. And he knoweth that he saith true, that ye might believe. For these things were done, that the scripture should be fulfilled, a bone of him shall not be broken. So the Apostle John mentions that obviously when they crucified Yahushua and they pierced him and all that came out, they checked if he was dead, and they didn't have to break his legs or any of that, because I believe, if I remember correctly, they would break the legs to speed up the death of the malefactors, those that were being crucified. But Yahushua died, and they didn't have to break his legs. So that precept, I believe, is in the book of Psalms. That is what the Apostle John is referencing here as being fulfilled upon seeing this. But then in verse 37, he also alludes to another precept, not saying per se that this is being fulfilled here, but he just mentions it anyway, right? So you can imagine it came to mind, where in verse 37 it says, and again another scripture saith, they shall look on him whom they pierced, right? And that's what we just read here in the book of Zechariah chapter 12 verse 10. And they shall look upon me whom they have pierced, And they shall mourn for him as one that mourneth for his only son, and shall be in bitterness for him as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn. Now, when this happened, when Yahushua was actually, crucified and pierced, yes, you had some that were mourning and crying, right, on those that believed in the Lord. But if you read the verse starting at the top, the Lord said he was going to pour upon the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. But when you reference the time of Yahushua, it wasn't all the inhabitants, all right, that were mourning for Yahushua upon seeing him being pierced. It was really only those that followed, or those that believed. Okay, but as we keep on reading, it's going to tell us that all the families here, right, are going to mourn when they see this image of Yahushua having been pierced. Okay, so this is something that's going to take place really in the kingdom. Verse 11, in that day shall there be a great mourning in Jerusalem, as the mourning of Hadad Ramon in the valley of Megiddo, which this is Megiddo, and I believe this references to when Josiah was killed in battle. When you actually look up here, we can look it up in the dictionary, in the Easton's Bible Dictionary, and just look up is that Hadad Ramon? There we go. So it says here, composed of the names of 2 Syrian idols, the name of a place in the valley of Megiddo. It is alluded to by the prophet Zechariah in a proverbial expression derived from the lamentation for Josiah, who was mortally wounded near this place. And they give you a reference precept. It has been identified with the modern Rumane, a village at the foot of the Megiddo Hills in a notch or valley about an hour and a half south of Tel Metzelim. Anyway, so it's likened here because there was a great mourning. When you read in the book of Jeremiah and Chronicles and Kings, it tells you that there was a great mourning. Everybody basically mourned when Josiah died, because he was one of the kings that did good. He held the huge Passover and all of that. So that's like not an analogy, but an example or a reference that Zechariah is making here, right? That there's going to be such a great mourning like that which happened when Josiah died. And the land shall mourn, verse 12, every family apart, the family of the house of David apart, and their wives apart, the family of the house of Nathan apart, and their wives apart. Now keep in mind, we're still in the same context of mourning, right? At the time when this actually happened, David wasn't there as David, right? If you can receive it, we believe, obviously we know he came as Peter, but this what we're reading here did not happen at the time Yahushua was actually pierced. Okay, where the house of David and their wives, the house of Nathan and their wives, and the rest of them are all mourning, the whole land mourning, that didn't happen. So this is something that is actually going to happen in the future. It says here, and their wives apart, the family of the house of Nathan apart, and their wives apart, the family of the house of Levi apart, and their wives apart, the family of Shimei apart, and their wives apart, all the families that remain, every family apart, and their wives apart. And that brings us to the end of the book of Zechariah, the 12th chapter. So as we read, it's pretty much the Lord, or Zechariah prophesying about the Lord defending Jerusalem, defending Israel, raising us up, protecting us, putting us in a position where nobody can come against us, and also then it makes reference to how we're going to mourn when we see that image of Yahushua having been pierced. Okay. Anyway, with that, I'm going to end it here. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Rakha Kodash. Until next time, Shalom.